Next, from Chicago, we talk one-on-one with Tom Wolf of the State Chamber of Commerce's Illinois Energy Council. He tells us what fracking is and how it's transformed the economies of Pennsylvania and North Dakota, and, in the process, dramatically transformed the amount of oil and gas being brought to the market. This runs about 30 minutes.
Tom Wolf, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Great to be here. It's always a good time to talk about energy.
You're the Executive Director of the Energy Council with the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, and I know in that role you keep yourself informed of a variety of issues that are ongoing relative to the overall topic of energy and energy production.
The world of energy is never boring.
It's never boring and always changing. Last time we were together was in the summer of 2012, and we were out in the greater Peoria area looking at windmills and solar panels.
A little warmer then.
A little warmer then. And people think of that as a new energy trend, and it is.
Absolutely.
The alternative energy. But what's really changing the world of energy, I think, and now perhaps coming to Illinois, is this whole concept of what is an odd word. It's called fracking. But it's really developing, apparently changing the whole energy profile of the United States. It's been massively successful, as far as what I know, in western Pennsylvania and in the Dakota area. First of all, what is this word fracking, and what is that about?
I'll start with the basics. Fracking, I think, until about 5 years ago, people thought fracking was a good 7-letter word off a G in in Scrabble, right? Called a bingo. No one really knew what fracking was. The term fracking comes from hydraulic fracturing. And again, I'm not a geologist or an engineer, so I'll do my best to explain it. It's the concept of drilling down into 4,000 to 6,000 feet underground into shale and putting a mixture of water, chemicals, and sand into a shale rock that loosens the resource from that rock and bring it to the surface. We've always known that the shale plays in the U.S., and they're all over the place, have oil and natural gas in them. There was no economical way to get at them. And about 5 to 7 years ago, they figured out a way to do drilling straight down, horizontal drilling in many directions, and then you put this 98% water substance, 2% chemicals and sand into, and you kind of frack the rock. You kind of high pressure the rock, releases the oil or gas, and you can bring it to the surface, and you have a new product. A product that we didn't have access to literally 7 years ago. And it has changed the face of energy in this country. There was a time where we imported 2/3 of our crude oil in this country. Now we're down to importing about 45% of the crude oil. There was a time 5 years ago when I started the Energy Council, we were talking about importing natural gas because we were going to run out. We didn't have enough natural gas.
Just 5 years ago?
Just 5 years ago we were talking about, gee, we're going to have natural gas. We have to import it from maybe Russia or Iraq or Iran. Now we're talking about exporting natural gas. We have changed the face of energy in 5 years with this. It's an old technology used in a different way.
I forget the actual names. One is the Marcellus Shale field. Is that Pennsylvania?
That is western Pennsylvania. It actually starts in Ohio, western Pennsylvania, up into New York.
And then the other massive production area right now, as I understand it, is what, in North Dakota?
Yeah, there's a region called the Bakken Shale play in western North Dakota, eastern Montana. Again, they're getting oil out of that play.
Is it typical to get oil along with the gas?
There's no typical. Again, what geologists tell me is that there's no shale that's the same. It just, they're different depth or different types of rock. They have different types of components, different elements of difficulty getting the product out. It just so happens that in North Dakota they're getting oil and gas, but they're really keeping the oil because it's got such value. North Dakota is the #2 state in our country now for oil development.
After what, Texas?
After Texas.
That's amazing. So it surpassed, who knew, right?
Surpassed Alaska. So they used to get, in 2005, they were getting about 40,000, 50,000 barrels a day out of North Dakota. Now they're getting 750,000 barrels a day out of North Dakota. And it's a gold rush. I mean, there's a lot of people, mostly guys, up there, engineers, working the trucks, working the rigs,
Yeah,
producing
we've heard
oil.
people making, like $40,000 a year working at McDonald's and things.
Yeah, well, there's some engineers on rigs making $1,700 a day, and they're renting houses in Williston, North Dakota for $4,000 a month. I mean, it's a gold rush. But it's been good for the country because it's another secure supply of crude oil that we didn't have 5 years ago. Eagle Ford, Texas, which is southern Texas, also has a natural gas oil play that's being really productive and taken an area of the country with a large unemployment and just turned it around. I mean, North Dakota has 3% unemployment now, and I think South Texas has about the same. And you talk to people there, they're like, who are the 3%? Why aren't they working? I mean, it's that kind of area now.
Yeah,
where
you
there's
almost
lots of
wonder, are
jobs.
they disabled or
Well,
what is it?
again, you never have 0% unemployment, but the reality is there's jobs if you want them.
Now, we're not here to talk necessarily about that, but to lay that as a foundation,
it's a good
and it
context,
shows
yes.
the promise of what
Right.
can happen with fracking. What's happening in Illinois? What has happened? What might happen?
Well, first let's do geography. There's an area of southeastern Illinois which is over the New Albany Shale. Again, we've always known the shale was there. It's roughly the Mississippi River, Indiana, the eastern part of Mississippi, the eastern
Ohio,
part of the
maybe,
state
area?
over the Indiana border, and then north to about Effingham, that area, that southeast area of the state. About 15 counties down there that are over the New Albany Shale. And the companies are beginning to look at that area and say, can we get oil or gas out of the New Albany Shale? They've done it again in other states. So they are coming to Illinois doing some early land leasing. The reports are they've spent $100 million with landowners just for the right to lease the land to check out the minerals.
Yeah, I know
underneath
off
it.
camera, you told me in preparation for this, that number, which to me was astounding. And I know that's just the beginning because I presume
Absolutely.
those farmers are going to have some kind of a royalty if the gas and especially if oil comes through.
If they're successful in making the play profitable and productive, yes, that's just the beginning.
And in southern Illinois, I want to point out for the viewers, I mean, this is an area that traditionally has a higher level of unemployment than other parts of the state.
Yeah, and I don't want to confuse people. There's two areas here of potential economic development. There's economic development that goes with the production, where you have engineers, truck drivers, hotels, everybody reaping the benefits of the production of the product. You also have the landowners, the farmers, landowners down there who get the land lease and the royalties if they're successful. You don't know where that money goes in terms of the landowner. They might be millionaires all of a sudden, and there's
Right.
reports of that in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and then they go move to Florida.
Yeah.
So you can't guarantee that money stays in the state. However, when you have people working in the state, producing that product, whether it's oil or gas, that does bring money in for the state, jobs in for the state. And whether those people are from Illinois or other parts of the country, they're working in Illinois, they're using Illinois products, they're buying Illinois food and staying at Illinois hotels or bringing in definite economic development for the state.
Now, probably most people, maybe they've heard about the development in other parts, as we mentioned, Pennsylvania, North Dakota. I don't think many people necessarily have heard that there's something happening in Illinois or that $100 million has already been put down into that economy. So on a timeline, where are we and what has to happen before they start drilling?
Well, it was determined that the industry was doing the land leasing, and they didn't really need new regulations for this. There's oil and gas production going on in Illinois now. It has been for 70 years. And most people don't remember that. I think Illinois now produces 20,000 barrels of oil a day. Again, not even close to what we need in this country. I think when I checked it out last, we produce enough in this state to meet our country's needs for 12 hours, in terms of the whole year's needs. But it's still 20,000 barrels a day. So we have regulations in place for drilling product in the southern part of our state. But this is a different process in terms of high pressure hydraulic fracturing with horizontal drilling. People wanted more regulations associated with that to protect the environment. And the industry wanted the certainty that if it starts to come in and test these wells and test drill this area, and if they were productive, they didn't want to be sideswiped with regulations that they didn't know about. So the industry is for regulatory certainty, and the regulators want to protect the environment, and so do we. So they've been sitting down at the table trying to come together and kind of hash out those regulations. that are necessary, I call it, to create that sweet spot. A spot where the industry wants to come in, test out the shale play, potentially create the economic development and the jobs and the product, and that we protect the environment as well.
First of all, what companies are involved in this? Are they Illinois companies? Are they national companies?
They're national companies. I mean, they're not. I mean, Illinois companies will be involved in the supply chain, but these are national companies that are doing the hydraulic fracturing now. Chesapeake, I think Prairie. I mean, there's other companies like Schlumberger that are doing it in other parts of the country. So it's unknown which companies will be here first, but there's companies that are interested in checking out the New Albany Shale.
And one part of that is they already are experienced in doing this. They've worked in other states. They've dealt with the EPAs in those areas, and
Absolutely.
they know how to sequester the. As I understand, there can be environmental concerns about the fluid, not only that goes down, but that comes out.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, again, there's no perfect energy. If there was, we'd be using it. And so you have a product. The process does include shooting water, the best term for it, underground, 5,000 to 6,000 feet underground, and it has, again, 99% water, sand, and some chemicals that release the product from the shale. That comes back up with the product, and you have to recycle and then eventually discard of that wastewater. It's not wastewater you want dumped off the side of the road, just like many processes. And there are regulations in place now in Illinois that you just can't dump wastewater from any process off the side of a road. They wanted more stringent ones specific to this industry, and that's what they're working on now. So the environmental pieces really are from the wastewater that comes back up with the product through the pipe. If that pipe isn't a good pipe, it could leak in areas where there is groundwater contamination that could affect drinking water. Again, that's why you have regulations to make sure that pipe is done well. And then when the water's on surface and it's wastewater, that has to be disposed of properly, and there's ways to do that. We dispose of wastewater for all kinds of processes in the state all the time. But that has to be regulated and done correctly. So that's the major issue that people have to deal with. It's the water coming up and what you do with the water after it's up, and make sure it's disposed of properly.
I was going to say, as you just said, everything has some element of pollution to it. We as humans contribute to pollution, and we have to deal with wastewater. But as a society, I mean, that's obviously for thousands of years. I mean, and in modern society, something we're accustomed to doing, treating this. Now, for those who, again, are new to this subject, there's been a couple of documentaries that are rather famous. One is a pro-fracking, one is an anti-fracking. The anti-fracking, which I believe came out first, Gasland. In essence, said this wasn't a good thing for a variety of reasons and that it would harm the environment. The Fracking Nation came out, which examined the charges from Gasland, and that documentary said basically those charges were founded on bogus evidence and that there really wasn't any massive problems, environmental problems. Have you looked at these documentaries?
I've seen.
You're kind of, I would say, a neutral party for those watching.
I try to be. I have not seen Gasland. I've seen some scenes from Gasland. I saw Frack Nation, which is much shorter. I would suggest to all your viewers, don't do public policy by looking at documentaries of any kind, of either side. I just don't think that's the best way to find the right information on what's going on.
Well, kind of both of those always go into it with an agenda, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's what
each of them.
That's what a documentary does. I mean, a documentary almost by definition has an agenda. There's very few documentaries that don't. So I don't think public policy should be based on scenes from a documentary.
And the recent movie with Matt Damon, I forget
Promised Land, I think
Promised Land, where it's
it got panned so bad I didn't even take the time to go see it. And again, same thing. It's Hollywood making a statement. I don't know what statement they made. I didn't see the movie.
Yeah, it's not weighing the evidence.
Right.
It's
listen, if you go to the U.S. Department of Energy website, they've got information about hydraulic fracturing. You can find information on it from, I think, reliable sources that give you the issues that are associated with this industry.
And where we started off, we said, look, it's been going on now for what, since about 2005 in
Yep,
Pennsylvania?
in terms of this high pressure hydraulic fracturing since about 2005.
So 8 years, and they've got a track record. They've got not only a track record with the EPA there, they got a track record of how to do things, that it's obviously working as far as extracting the energy from the ground. And I don't know.
Well, that's what I tell people. It's like we're not the first men on the moon here. I mean,
Right.
Ohio, North Dakota, Texas, Pennsylvania, Colorado. These are people who like their land, like their environment, like their water, and they have found that regulatory sweet spot and tweaked it over the years to make sure they continue to protect the environment and get the product out of the ground and have the economic benefits that go with it. They're even doing this in California. There's a company that's fracking underneath Beverly Hills. So I'd like to say that if they can find a way to do it underneath Beverly Hills, we can find that sweet spot to do it underneath Southern Illinois.
Let's go back to the groundwater just on the environment. One of the charges was that it could pollute the groundwater. Now, the industry tends to say no, because groundwater would be measured in hundreds of feet deep, and the fracking is taking place how deep?
4,000 to 7,000 feet right now.
So way below where the water table would be.
That is correct.
And your earlier statement, just to revisit it, sometimes people may be blanked out when you said this, the one area where it could be therefore polluting the groundwater is if, when you're extracting the fluid that you pump down, the casing of the pipe were to crack, then some level of that fluid would
That's where concern actually has reality. I mean, if you think about what's 7,000 feet below ground right now, that it doesn't migrate. It doesn't. There's just geology doesn't work that way. It doesn't migrate. I've heard Lisa Jackson, who's the U.S. EPA administrator, who's no fan of many energies, say there's no evidence that this has migrated to any drinking water or aquifer. Bill Clinton, I was at an event where he said that's not the issue with this. It's not migrating from 7,000 feet up into groundwater. The things that need to be regulated and to be watched so the industry does it correctly, and the industry wants to do it correctly, is to make sure the well casing is, that pipe is correctly done so it doesn't leak on the way up or the way down, and then you get rid of your wastewater when it reaches the surface. And if you do those correctly, this can be, it is already an amazing product or a difference for our energy supply in our country that hasn't had a huge detriment to our environment. Now, it does change the environment. You definitely have rural Pennsylvania where the Marcellus Shale is. There's more roads, there's more activity, there's more trucks, there's more jobs. I mean, that comes with it. So I'm
There's
not
also
saying,
more, look, you're going to have heavy trucks, which will be damaging the roadways. On the other hand, you're going to be producing millions of dollars in revenues to various levels of government, both local,
and
county, state.
and they upgrade the roads.
And they upgrade the roads.
And sometimes the companies put money directly into that in some states to help upgrade the roads. So, because they have every interest in making sure the roads work as well. So I'm not saying it doesn't. It changes, when I talk about changing the environment, it changes the economic environment. When you change the economic environment of an area, you change the area.
It's not like strip mining and where you leave and you...
Well, it's not strip mining. Strip mining people think is like this huge hole in the ground. These are like wells that are like every couple miles. I mean, you're going to have more roads, you're going to have more truck traffic, you're going to have more activity, you're going to have more people. That changes your environment as a whole. It doesn't necessarily make the environment worse. But, I don't want to think people that, well, there's two people with a straw going underground and that's it. This does change the area. Western Pennsylvania has changed. Southern Texas has changed. North Dakota has changed. But I think generally it's changed for the good. The environment in terms of the water and air, I don't think has changed that much. It's just the economic environment changes because you have a lot more people doing a lot more work. And that does change that area. If you like a rural, quiet area that doesn't have lots of jobs, like lots of economic activity, that will change. I think that's okay, but some people have a problem with that.
Well, and I was going to say, relative to, as we talked about, with 3% unemployment in North Dakota, I don't know what it is in Western Pennsylvania, but the point is they're creating a lot of jobs.
Creating a lot of jobs.
And there are going to be any number of people both living in Southern Illinois, in the area that would be affected, as well as other areas that might want to migrate from wherever to seek those jobs. So where do we to make this happen? Aside from the geology and the companies coming in and investing, they're not going to want to come in until they know what the rules of the game are in Illinois, which means we have to pass some legislation.
Yep, that's correct.
There's ongoing negotiations. Once people come to an agreement in that negotiations, then they'll write a bill and introduce it and perhaps pass it. Who knows? Should that pass? Well, first of all, do you happen to know where we are in those negotiations, or if there are any hang-ups, what are the contentious issues?
Well, I know more of where we are. I mean, there's been, since really last March, so almost a year now, there have been different groups negotiating very stringent legislation. If passed the way it's being negotiated, probably the most stringent in the country, because it's a state-by-state issue. There's still work to be done. They've made a lot of progress. So when I say they, it's representatives of the legislature, representatives of environmental groups, the Attorney General's office, and the oil and gas industry, and the Petroleum Council, and business groups like the Chamber and the IMA, the Manufacturers Association. We're all basically at the table trying to hash something out that, again, provides that sweet spot. They've made tremendous progress. I've heard, 85 to 90% there in terms of agreement between all the groups about what needs to be done, what has to be done, but it's not there yet. It's not done. And so until it's done, it's not done. So there's every hope from a lot of people around that table that something can be done and agreed to, and that the representatives who are helping with this will come out with a bill that most people will agree on and we can get passed.
And I know no one can say when the Illinois legislature would pass any bill, but
that's correct. No one can say that.
The hope would be, if I'm hearing you right, that something would come out of the legislature this spring.
That is our hope. To us, it's almost unimaginable that we could turn our backs on this type of potential economic opportunity. Our state's just not in a position to turn our backs on this. And that since we're not the first state to do it, there's other states that have found this sweet spot. We find it unimaginable that we can't come to some agreement and come up with a regulation this session and move this forward.
And it seems to me, just right off the top of my head, there's two economic aspects to this. One is, and it's ironic in a way that it's happening in the very area of southern Illinois where we have massive amounts of coal, but the coal industry down in southern Illinois has been pretty much decimated over the years by the Clean Air Act, I would say, unless you would say I'm misstating this.
I think you are, but we'll come back to that in a second. I'll let you finish your statement.
But the point is, it has damaged the coal industry for a variety of reasons in southern Illinois. The coal that we have is high sulfur coal. It's less desirable from an environmental standpoint. So that you would be pumping dollars into that part of the state that has been harmed, but has been previously had an economy that was tied very closely to energy production. Now the other aspect, we and all the other media, people I'm sure sick of hearing about it, but talking about the pensions and the amount of economic damage that's been done to the state, the budget and all.
Yep.
And obviously, no one knows probably how many dollars. I don't know if anyone's even speculated how many dollars might flow to the state, but why don't you just talk? I know this is laying a long foundation, a long question here, but let's talk about those two aspects to the extent you can about the employment in southern Illinois, as well as, has anyone run the numbers and said, based upon our estimates and based upon current dollar values for oil and gas, what kind of dollars might it mean to the state government, and who knows, maybe it would help solve that.
We haven't done that specifically, but we've, the study that we did at the Chamber on the potential jobs, 1,000 jobs to 47,000 jobs, and again, the 1,000 jobs happens if they just go test the wells. The 47,000 jobs happen over 5 years if they actually get the product out of the ground, the natural gas for our study. And if it was a successful play, in other words, they're getting product out of the ground economically, that's 45,000 jobs and $9.5 billion of economic activity in the state. Some of that goes to the state. Now,
is that 9.5 billion over a year or over a period of time?
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years. Okay.
So, and that doesn't stop after 5 years, it keeps going. Again, we didn't take a percentage and say
so just to take a 5-year window and try to not go too far out, because because to come up with those numbers, you got to speculate what gas and oil would be 5 years.
Exactly. So you basically look at what you can realistically take a look at. In 2 years of testing, 3 years of production, if they find it, comes to about 45,000 jobs, $9.5 billion of economic activity. Well, of course, that's going to help the state. We didn't do a specific tax revenue piece. Now, I don't want people to think this is going to save our pension or save our budget. That's just too big. No one industry can do that. But why wouldn't you want to have another industry? An industry is not looking for a handout. They're not looking for tax breaks. They're looking for a roadmap to come in here, create new jobs and new opportunities in an area of the state that can certainly use it. Now, to your first point,
go ahead,
I want people to, coal is, talked about a lot. People assume it's going away. We still get 40% of our energy in the state of Illinois from coal. Coal generation is still a major part of our portfolio, and coal though coal generation's been going down over the years. It was like 48% of our electricity about 5 years ago, and now it's 40. Coal production is actually up. Coal production is up like 20% over the last 2 years. We actually have more coal mines now in the state than we had 7 years ago. We're actually producing more coal. 85% of that's leaving the state, going to other parts of the country or other parts of the world. So there are energy jobs in southern Illinois.
Right.
So it's not an either-or situation. There's another opportunity to create a product, natural gas or oil, that we need in this country as part of our economy, and it can come from Illinois. Why wouldn't we try to do that?
I don't want to get too deep in the woods, but sometimes people go, why can't we have solar and wind power? And the answer is we can and we do. But on the energy...
You've answered my question, thank you.
On the energy pie, well, again, to go back to the tour that we took together last summer, in fact, if people haven't been through some of the central parts of Illinois, I think they might be amazed at the number of windmills that they would come and do, just massive wind farms.
Yep.
In fact, do you even know approximately how many windmills there are in the state of Illinois?
No, but I know that we're fourth in the country now for wind power, which is pretty amazing.
Is it measured in thousands of windmills?
It's measured in thousands of megawatts. I don't know how many windmills. But we're number 4 in the country.
Well, relative to the energy pie, if we had a pie chart right now, roughly what percent of our energy is produced by wind and solar?
I can tell you exactly. I did the numbers last Friday actually for another presentation. 4% of the energy generated in our state is wind. 48% is nuclear. 40% is coal. 6% natural gas. 4% wind.
Now, people say, and they're right, coal is dirty. They're especially right that Illinois coal is dirty because, again, it has a higher sulfur than, say, the Wyoming coal, coal that's mined in some of the other areas. On the other hand, we're talking about extracting natural gas. Might the environmental community be in favor of fracking because we could switch out on our electrical power plants the use of natural gas in lieu of coal?
First of all, to say coal is dirty is a simplistic approach.
I'm sorry, what kind
simplistic
of?
Approach.
Simplistic.
I mean, coal plants now are cleaner than they've ever been. I mean, this is not your grandfather's coal plant anymore.
Because of, they put scrubbers in.
They put scrubbers, they have new technology. The Prairie State coal plant that just opened up last year in southern Illinois is, I think they have a $4 billion plant. $1 billion of that is environmental controls. They have 50% less regulated emissions out of that plant and 15% less greenhouse gas emissions because it's a new plant and it's efficient. So to say coal just is dirty, I think is simplistic. Now it has more greenhouse gas emissions than a natural gas plant. I think it's about 50% less greenhouse gas emissions of natural gas compared to today's coal plants. But environmental groups have been kind of all over the board on this one, which you can ask them why, but some like the natural gas because they say it could usurp coal. Some don't like natural gas because of the way that it's processed and it could cause environmental harm if you do it wrong. Some don't trust the process and think somebody's hiding something. I mean, you hear all sorts of conspiracy theories on fracking. So again, the industry is never of one voice. Politicians are never of one voice. The environmental community is not of one voice on this one. They are saying different things, except they want the environment protected, as do we. So we are a one voice there. And we think, the industry, the chamber, the IMA, think you can do that. It can protect the environment and have hydraulic fracturing in our state. Some environmental groups haven't gotten that far yet.
Again, to take a simplistic concept, people would look at the chamber and say, you guys are all just about business, but in point of fact, you've worked on various projects over the years very closely with unions as well.
And environmental groups.
And environmental groups. So who's on board with this? Or where, to your knowledge, where are the various groups on this issue?
There's a new group coalition called Grow Illinois Coalition. The oil and gas producers, the Petroleum Council, the Illinois Manufacturers Association, the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, the truckers, the rail folks. There's lots of other groups that are coming on board, looking at this and saying, really, we're going to turn our backs to this? I mean, we just started the coalition about 2 weeks ago, just to have it ready in place in case there was a legislative battle on this. We're hoping there's not, but we wanted to showcase that there's a large group of business interests and other interests across the state that want to look at this and want to have this happen. And I think, you know, ultimately, I think we'll be successful. You know, battles in Springfield can be hard sometimes, but I think, again, we're not, if you look at what other states have done and what they're doing, they've proven you can do this. And though the Chamber is a business organization, we understand that business only thrives in an environment where people can be healthy. But this isn't a no-risk proposition. There's no energy that is a zero-risk proposition. It's managing the risk. And other states have shown you can manage this risk. We risk, we trust our cars, our bridges, everything to work. Airplanes have to fall out of the sky. I mean, there's nothing that's perfect. Sometimes they fail, but the reality is the benefit outweighs any risk at all, and you can manage the risk to the point where this works, and it's worked in so many other places, and other countries are looking at this now, that it's really changing the way we look at energy in our country.
And lastly, I mean, sometimes people don't wake up in the morning and wonder about national security issues, I guess, unless you're in the military, but from a national security standpoint, those of us who are old enough to remember that we had an embargo on oil importation, the Arab oil embargo of 1973.
I'm old enough for that, yes.
Where we had the gas lines. As I understand it, in very short order, I heard the other day that I think within 5 years, the United States might be the largest producer of oil in the world, surpassing Saudi Arabia.
I have read that. I'm not sure I believe that yet, because I'm old school like you. I'm like, really?
Or perhaps with Canada.
Well, listen, already, I mean, again, what people have to understand is some of this hydraulic fracturing, it's not just natural gas, it's oil. In North Dakota, Texas, other places, we're getting oil. We used to import 60% of the oil we need in this country from all over the world. Now we import 45%. So we get more than half of our oil now from the U.S. And if you include Mexico, Canada, the NAFTA countries, we get about 70 to 75% of the oil we need every day we get from NAFTA countries, us, Canada, Mexico. Now, does that make us energy independent? No, but it's certainly closer than we were about 7 years ago.
I would say it makes us energy secure. We have after the Arab oil embargo, we started the Strategic Petroleum Reserve so that our armed forces would have roughly a 90-day supply of oil. These days I tell people Canada and Mexico are our Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
And now we are too.
And we are too. And you know, I think a lot of Illinoisans have not heard it. Actually, it was one of those jaw-dropping statistics I heard. Illinois does more trade with Alberta, Canada, than with any state in the nation.
That's correct.
And it's, again, because of the oil.
It's because of the energy. And it's not just oil coming down, it's also our trucks and supplies going up into Alberta. Caterpillar, John Deere, other supply chain folks, companies in Illinois that send Illinois Tool Works, that does work up in Canada, and now some of them in North Dakota. So again, energy is it's not easy to understand. People hope it's easy because they want to just pump gas in their car, turn their heat on, and turn electricity on. But it works pretty well, and all things have been getting better. We've actually been able to lower our greenhouse gas emissions in this country. Hopefully the economy will grow soon again. And we're getting more product of all kinds, more wind, more solar, more natural gas, more cleaner coal, more crude oil. You know, there's a lot of smart people working very hard to do things better. And people talk about an energy policy in our country. We should have an energy policy. And to me, the energy policy is let's all do it better. And I think we need a diversity of supply, so we're not relying just on one energy. And they're all trying to do it better.
All right, well, Tom Wolf, I guess we can only squeeze so much. It's a fascinating topic. You can only cover so much, but I think we covered pretty much.
I enjoyed it, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
All right, well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.